Hello, History of Sexuality students. This is Professor Bowen here with some comments on our Week 13 discussion of the Kinsey Reports. As many of you noted in your posts, Kinsey's studies were part of a more general shift in American sexuality after World War II. This was a shift in which many individuals started linking concerns about American sexuality to other social and national problems. As critics like John Partland believed, our sexual habits were becoming something of a worldwide scandal. And like Partland, many Americans began to worry about the sexual state of their country. Indeed, this is why some were critical of the Kinsey Reports, because they aired the country's dirty laundry to the entire world, and in doing so, weakened America's international standing. Or so the theory went. But this opens up an interesting question. What did people outside the United States actually think about the Kinsey Reports? What was the reception of these like in other parts of the world? Was it true that American sexuality was viewed as something scandalous by the citizens of other countries? Or was this just an American fear that didn't align very well with what people outside the United States thought about American sexuality? In what follows, I'd like to address these questions, focusing on the reception of the Kinsey studies in Europe. Because during the 1950s, both of Kinsey's volumes were translated into French, German, and Italian, along with Spanish and Portuguese. And readers of these translations often reached similar conclusions about the state of American sexual culture. And interestingly, these conclusions were sometimes the exact opposite of those conclusions that American readers reached. For example, whereas in the United States, a common fear was that the United States was fast becoming eroticized, in Europe, many looked upon the reports as evidence of America's sexual underdevelopment. For example, in its commentary, one West German magazine concluded that what Kinsey's findings ultimately showed was that, quote, in the realm of love, the average American man was fairly underdeveloped, and the consequence was that the love life of the American woman has been deformed and inhibited in multiple ways. Statements such as these reflected pre-existing European views that Americans were sexually frigid, that their sexual culture was repressive and overly moralistic. As one Swiss writer put it, when Americans had orgasms, they always did so, quote, with a bad conscience. Because of their puritanical religious views on sex, they couldn't help but see sex as sinful, and as a result, Americans didn't actually know what true sexual self-satisfaction really felt like. America, in other words, was a place full of sex negativity. By contrast, Europeans saw themselves as sexually enlightened, as sexually mature. Its people already knew everything about sex and displayed none of the hang-ups seen in the U.S. European commentators agreed that in their countries there were no Puritan laws and no sexual taboos. Moreover, there was love and feeling and romance, something altogether missing from American sexuality. Over and over again, European responses to the Kinsey studies faulted these for failing to address the question of love. It appeared that Americans, perhaps on account of their sexual puritanism, insisted on the separation of love and sex. But Europeans agreed that this was an error and celebrated the fact that their medieval ancestors were the ones who had created and brought the idea of romance to the world. As one Italian reviewer put it, quote, in a word, in Europe, love is not essentially that great sin that Americans would have us believe it is. Romantic love, it appeared, had disappeared in the United States. Echoing this view, another Italian reviewer claimed that Kinsey's investigation, quote, lays bare the true face of the USA and it is the face of beasts and of the jungle. As remarks like these indicate, the European reception of the Kinsey Reports was often used to establish the sexual otherness of the United States. In that sense, commentaries on Kinsey's research were used to construct ideas of national or regional differences in sexual culture. On account of this, few Europeans believed that the Kinsey Reports had any relevance at all for European sexuality. As one Italian reviewer put it, quote, "It is important to stress that the conclusions of this research, which is based purely on the U.S., cannot automatically be applied to other national groups or cultural areas." Other European writers referred to the absurd and all too American Kinsey Report, which is another turn of phrase pointing to some of the ways that Europeans used Kinsey's research to try to create cultural distance between themselves and the United States. This is not entirely surprising. In fact, given European fears of Americanization that characterized the early years of the Cold War, which was a time when Marshall Plan dollars and Hollywood cultural influence flowed freely through a war-torn continent, all of this is understandable. It also explains why some feared that America's present would soon become Europe's future. Would the things Kinsey observed in the U.S. soon become prevalent in England, France, Germany, and Italy? Would love and romance soon disappear? And if so, would sex become dry, mechanical, and about nothing more than the satisfaction of animalistic urges? Seeing in Kinsey an example of the American tendency to separate love from all considerations of emotional intimacy, of tenderness, and of love, Europeans feared that they too soon would be cast adrift in a sea of lonely sex, the empire of Onan, as one writer put it, the definitive reign of masturbation, with or without a partner. Outside of Europe, the reception of the Kinsey Reports is something that awaits further study. We don't know how people in Latin America, in the Middle East, or in any other part of Asia responded to this. We also don't know much about the Soviet Union. Were Kinsey's studies here greeted with studied silence? Was there an information blockade that prevented the peoples of the USSR from learning about this? Were Kinsey's studies ever even translated into Russian or any of the other languages spoken throughout the Soviet bloc? To my knowledge, there haven't been any studies of this. So, if anyone is looking to make an original contribution to knowledge on this topic, the Soviet Union might be a good place to start. All right, that's all I think I've got to say for now. Thanks for watching this video. I hope that you found it informative. If you're interested in learning more about the European reception of the Kinsey Reports, I would recommend the following articles. And if you have any questions about any of this, please do let me know. If not, I look forward to seeing you all in this week's discussion board. Until then, be well and stay safe, everyone. I'll see you all later. Bye-bye for now.